Good afternoon, Frank. Wow. It is 1:41 in the afternoon on Sunday. A few minutes late, but my laptop is it's getting as I said before we went on air, it's muita fraca. It's getting very weak. It's going down whenever the battery doesn't charge that well anymore. But hey, how have you been? I didn't get a chance to touch base with you before we press go here.
Well, hey, good afternoon, Noah. Yeah, we don't like to be late.
Mm-hmm.
I think being on time says a lot about us, a lot about our priorities, a lot about our standards. So you and I do not like to be late, but we could have said, "Hey, we were late, so let's just scratch the whole thing." But thankfully, sometimes it's better to be consistent than on time. So we're being consistent. We're building a big library of content. We don't have a lot of people watching right now. I believe at some point that's going to change. We're going to have a nice big fat library of content waiting for people. And I want to say for the 10 or 20 or whoever we have now, like, don't be afraid to share it. Don't be afraid to be a first mover. Give us some help. Give us some momentum. We're not going to embarrass you. And I can tell you this, whatever we lack in production, Noah, you and I talk about all the time, we don't have the fancy production, the bells and whistles, the great presentation that I see in some other podcasts that I admire, that I'm envious of, that I'm jealous of, that you and I talk about a lot. We don't have that. But what we do have right now is we're running on a burning desire. We're running on faith in something, passion in something, and we have a lot of substance. There's a lot of goodies in these podcasts if somebody wants to pour through them. There's a lot of good stuff in these podcasts, a lot of substance. You can learn a lot as a student, as a teacher, as a thinker, as a doer, as a motivator. There's a lot of goodies to bite into when people watch these podcasts. So that's why we do it.
Frank, I don't know if you're familiar with this. Flo Grappling's done a few episodes on them, but I feel like we're the Daisy Fresh of Jiu-Jitsu podcasting. If you're not familiar with Daisy Fresh, just about as Midwestern hard scrapple type of vibe Jiu-Jitsu academy as there is. They're legit. They've been winning a lot. I was going to say along those lines about our production quality. My laptop, I think it's 2014, so it's about 7 years old, and graphics has come a long ways in a decade. So for long, I know I am being pushed slowly into the corner where I have got to replace this laptop.
Well, you know what's crazy for me, Noah? You know that a lot of people may or may not know that I come from a journalism background. So my background was I went to college, the University of Maryland, for one reason and one reason only, and that was to be a Division I wrestler for a top 20 program. That was my dream. That was like education, like getting an education, I'm sad to admit this, but getting a college degree, getting a bachelor's degree was like so far down. It was like a big gap between me and my wrestling motivation for college and then getting the degree. Like I was there. I wanted to be an All-American. I wanted to be an ACC and Atlantic Coast Conference champion. I wanted to be as good as I could be. That was my singular focus. And then I wind up having an occluded artery, a blocked artery behind my knee, and that's the popliteal artery, and I got a blockage there. And my legs started to shrink. It was incredible pain. I couldn't walk more than a block or two without immense, just writhing in pain, intense pain. And then I wound up having a bypass surgery. I have 27-inch scar down that leg. And then that actually, the dominoes of life fall. In every adversity, there's always opportunity. There's always opportunity in adversity. And so I wind up becoming a journalist at the student newspaper. and I wind up covering the wrestling team, which was not nearly as good as being on the wrestling team, and not nearly as fun. You go from being an athlete, being a participant, to being a spectator, not nearly as much fun, but that's the best I could do. And I was still around the sport. Then I was covering women's field hockey, women's lacrosse. So I've worked, I wind up working right outside of Washington, D.C., wind up working for the Salt Lake Tribune, the Las Vegas Review-Journal, the two biggest papers in Utah and Nevada. And what's interesting is I've done all of these print interviews. Most of the print stuff I've ever done, like all these thousands and thousands of stories, they're not online because they were before Google, before the algorithms, right? Before everybody was hashtagging. And so most of them I'd have to go to the newspaper and go through a more cumbersome steps to dig up those archives and then convert them into e-files and then put them on the internet, which I probably will do someday. So most of my stuff's not out there. And then on the video end, you and I are doing this, but I did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of interviews at UFC, post-fight interviews when the fighters would come out of the octagon, did hundreds of those, did interviews at World Series of Fighting when I worked for them, loved it. And what's crazy is I've almost been cursed. When I call the UFC, and I've got some good friends over there in the media department, they're like, we can't find we can't find any of the interviews you've done with the UFC fighters. So I'm just like, I want some of that almost like as a highlight reel, almost for my own, my own professional packaging, my marketing materials. I mean, it was awesome to be on the front lines, and that's pretty rare and extraordinary to be able to do those interviews, to be behind the scenes, and Dana White greenlighting it himself and saying, yeah, go do that. And there's not one, they can't find them. They can't find like one of me interviewing all these fighters. We had GSP and, just tons of them. Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, World Series of Fighting. I think there's one or two or three on the internet of that. So anyway, now here you and I are, it's like, okay, this is my latest crack at like, okay, can I do some cool stuff about fighting that actually is like out there? And then, and then we'll get the presentation and the packaging and the bells and whistles to it. And it's like, please, dear Lord. So, it'll be a very precious day. But on the other hand, be grateful that you and I are here. This is what we love to do. We do this anyway. We were doing this anyway. We were having these conversations anyway. So we were like, why not just crystallize it, immortalize it, put it on the internet, and it'll live forever. And who knows, maybe one day the library of us talking about a lot of things, digging into a lot of important questions, maybe that'll be worth something. Maybe there'll be a lot more eyeballs on it.
A big part of why I wanted to do this podcast with you, not only is it like we had so much to talk about when we sat down after training together, and so it's just like, well, it just makes sense just to put this to record it. But I also find that by directed attention towards this, it elevates us in a way. Not elevates us from an ego perspective, but from it elevates our attention onto the subject matter. Because now I think we're almost 70 episodes in, and during that time we've covered a lot of material, but there's still so much more. And then it's like something is happening in my mind as we do this week in, week out. Jiu-jitsu just, it's not unlike a lot of people, with their sports. It's like, this is part of me now. It's like something that is so deep in me now that I can't walk, I'll never be able to walk away from jiu-jitsu. I was explaining this to someone the other day, that if I could just, if all my ordinary necessary needs were taken care of financially, I would do jiu-jitsu all day, to some aspect, all day. This is all I would do, until I die. It's just, I love it so much. There's so much material there. So, I got to tell you, I wasn't thinking very intelligently. So the sheepdog that I have is a puppy, and he has a lot of energy. and you need to work that energy out of him. And so I've since he was probably about 6 months, I've been taking him on the leash, walking him, of course. Well, I have to up level that and me get on my mountain bike and ride with him running on the side or walking or trotting, or trotting, looks like a fast walk. So today, I had him out, and we were all out today riding family, and I was bringing him back, and I had ridden him out back and forth to the dog park many times with the bike,
Mm-hmm.
and he comes across a big black poodle, and I'm I I just had that feeling. I'm like, today's the day I'm going to hit the pavement. Today's the day I'm going to hit the pavement. I just had that premonition. Sure enough, the poodle lunges, and so the my dog, which is essentially a puppy still, I haven't trained that out of him yet to lunge. Okay, and I've got a point I'm making with this story. But anyways, he lunged, and down I go. Sure, the handlebars pops me in the chest. I've got a heck of a bruise forming right here, right now, and I busted my knee down onto the rocks, and I broke the part of my handlebars. Went down kind of hard, but because of me doing daily meditation practice through the Waking Up app that Sam Harris has, I slowed down time as I was falling, and I adjusted the bike just so, and I mindfully let go of the leash because I didn't want to pull the dog into the bike falling. Um, and when I let him go, he didn't know what to do because he has this poodle over there barking at him, and so he just stops and stares at me, and then just walks a few, that he reacted to that. But what I'm saying is, I slowed down time as I was falling, and um, I managed to move the bike, move the handle. Was trying to maneuver it, but there's a weird thing about jujitsu and all the benefits of it, which are like, you got to use meditation to improve your jujitsu. And today I busted my knee, but I prevented hurting my puppy, from pulling him into it. I slowed time down to let him go. And all I'm saying is the point of all this is, well, first off, uh, I recognize that I've got to train this dog so he doesn't react to other dogs barking at him, but also that I also saw the benefit of jujitsu in an accident, and it's able to slow down time and recognize things happening. And although I fell and got hurt, it could have been a lot worse. So there's something strange about jujitsu. It inoculates you. It's a stress inoculation whenever you need to move your body, handle your weight, um, in a split second. It just does that to you, and that's just one example. And, among many daily throughout my life, I've committed myself to improving how I eat. I've learned better how to better hydrate myself. And I want to ask you. Last week we talked a little bit
No,
about
wait,
things.
let me piggyback.
Yeah, go
Pardon
ahead.
me 1 second.
But I
No, I want
wanted
to
to have
piggyback
you
what you
talk about
said
the hydration.
because by coincidence, and the older I get, I'm a very spiritual man. I don't necessarily believe in coincidences, so I too had a bike mishap a couple hours ago. So that's interesting. We both
We both.
on a beautiful Sunday, very synchronous. That's the kind of synchronicity you and I have going. We both probably was like the same time. Uh, I was riding my bike, and I have this nice mountain bike. A buddy of mine moved to Romania, and he was moving like last minute, and he's like, I gotta get it. So it's a nice bike, so I bought it on a discount. Beautiful bike, I love it. It's kind of a mountain kind of slash road bike. I've had road bikes most of my life, but this is kind of a mountain bike. So anyway, not always the best thing to be riding around the streets of Las Vegas. Kind of a, my mountain bike hybrid's not the fastest thing. So the tires are thicker and there's a little more stick on the tires. They're not the smooth tires. So they really bite into anything. They get a lot of traction. Anyway, I was distracted. I was looking at a group of people like to my left, and I was on kind of a little winding like pathway, like a winding concrete pathway. But here in Las Vegas, you know, a lot of our landscaping, even if you're driving on the highway, is rock. We love rock landscape. We don't have, you drive in Maryland or Pennsylvania or Tennessee, you drive those interstates, and if you look over off the road, you're looking at trees, really high trees usually, right? And green. Well, here in Vegas, if you look off the road, usually you're looking at rocks. You're looking at concrete or rocks, just a bunch
Yeah.
of rocks. We make these rocks that take the place of trees and everything else. And um, so I was looking to my left at these people, and I looked longer than I should, and I didn't pay attention. And my bike had inadvertently, it's weird because I'm so sensitive and I'm so aware, and I didn't feel the bike creeping, 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 and then it hits those rocks. It veers off, so it
Oh,
changes surfaces. It dips off the concrete. It dips into the rocks. So but once it hits the rocks, I'm aware now, and I'm like, oh wait, my bike level just dropped. I'm now going downhill,
oh
and there's and I,
no.
and I'm and there's rocks. When you brake on the rocks, now the bike slide. Now the tires start sliding and giving. So as soon as I brake, the tire starts. The tires come to a stop. The tires start sliding, and I just instinct kicked in, and I went over
Oh
over the
man.
handlebars, over the handlebars. But what was crazy about it is I went over the handlebars. I jumped over the handlebars and nothing happened to me. I landed on my feet. The bike, went, sliding off. But I went over the handlebars. I braked and I went over the handlebars and wound up jumping. I like jumped almost like, like your legs are spread wide, and I went and jumped it and hurdled it. And then of course, right when it's done, you're like, well, wait, what just happened? Like, how did that happen? I'm
Yeah.
like, I've been biking for a long time. There were no cars nearby or anything like that. So there's no cars, just regular people on a Sunday afternoon. It's beautiful. The sun is out. It's not like a strong wind. It's like 75 degrees.
Hmm.
Like, I'm just like, what just happened? How did I like wind up on a slide out, like almost like even for you, I mean, you got to count your blessings. If you hit your knee and whatever, you hurt your pec there. I mean, things can go. I remember years ago when I was at the University of Maryland, I did a lot of volunteer work at a homeless shelter. There were people that would come to those homeless shelters that had been scientists, and they fell. I remember one guy, he fell from his bike and he hit his head, and he lost a lot of his brain function, and he lost his wife and his kids, and he wound up being homeless, tragically. So like, anyway, I
Wow.
know that
From a
I know
bike
that's
accident?
yeah, from a bike accident in the Washington D.C. area. The point is that it could be a lot worse, right? Like, that was just like, I could have planted. And in the old days, I used to wear the shoes that were locked in. So when you fall and you tip, you really have to know what you're doing then, because a lot of times you can't get your feet out in time. I wouldn't have been able to hurdle a
Hmm.
bike, and you just tip, you just fall to one side or something, and your shoulder just eats it. What was interesting is when this happened. So of course I got up, I was like counting my blessings, like, phew, I dodged one there. At the very least, you at the very least at our age, you fall, and if you fall really hard, you got an extra injury that's going to bother you for another 2, 3, 4 months. And, then you got to work around it. It's just a pain in the butt at the very least, right? Maybe in the worst case, it could have been something for worse. But I'm like, I remembered, I was like, wow, because I got slammed on my shoulder in jiu-jitsu like 5 weeks ago. And I was thinking, damn, like that, the injury when I got it a couple of weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, I was like, man, I should have been I should have been more vigilant. I should have been hand fighting more. I should have been more aggressive. I should have been more explosive. There was a lot more I could have done. That would not have happened. I was kind of being lackadaisical a little bit and just a little too chill in a position. I wound up getting slammed backwards. And I was like, damn it, next time, be more vigilant, be more explosive, be more aware, stop playing around there. So I kind of was blaming myself, like that did not need to happen. Well, then the bike thing happens, and I'm thinking, well, hey, I dodged one here, so now we're even. I'm like, well, the shoulder hurts. It doesn't bother me as much because I'm like, well, the shoulder's healing now, but it's almost like I was due. Like I'd rather have taken that then than get something maybe even worse than the bike. So I'm like, well, I kind of balanced out, right? Like, karma, I kind of balanced out. Like, all right, I dodged one today. So that one 5 weeks ago was stupid. I should have been paying more attention. I should have been more vigilant. I should have been more explosive. I should have been more aggressive about the hand fight, more assertive. Lesson learned. But then today I'm like, well, damn, you dodged one today. So anyway, what a coincidence. We both made it to the podcast though. So
Oh yeah, no, nothing would stop me from the podcast. I enjoy this. Enjoy our time every week. It's a little therapy for me. It's a little therapy. Um, I do miss. There's things that come up during the week I want to talk about. I'm like, we don't have enough time to talk about this. So we have to winnow away what we want to talk about. And I know I'm going to be sore. This 48-year-old body, I have been rough on it growing up in East Texas, rough on it. And so I came home and washed out the gravel out of the knee. And yeah, I always wear a helmet. Just, it's that your skull can just it's too easy to get brain damage. It's too easy. So let's move on from there. I read an article on one of the jiu-jitsu sites this week because I use Google News as my news feed, and so it adapts to whatever I like to read, and then it sprinkles in some things that I just don't find interesting at all. I don't know, like, well, where's this come from? And it talked about hydration, and
mm-hmm.
I don't know if we got into, I don't know if we covered the basis on hydration last week, but wanted to expand a little bit more on hydration with you, because the article essentially said it's okay to just use table salt in your water, because somehow that induces the body to uptake more water.
Yeah, that's old. That's old. That's not new, but yes,
and
that's correct. That's been
and
out there a long time. It wasn't widely embraced by a lot of people, but that is true. Yeah, but I would caution anyone about table salt. I would absolutely not do table salt. I would do a Himalayan sea salt or a Redmond sea salt or a Celtic salt, or if you're somewhere else in the Middle East or in the Mediterranean or um, and and there's some really good mountains and mines around, maybe Ukraine or something. If you have some great salt there, then yeah. But here in the States, one of those salts that I'm talking about now, it's always a question of how much. I mean, so just like anything, I mean, there's a line, there's always a balance. I mean, I'm not a big drinker. I hardly ever drink, but there's a difference between people that drink 2 beers and people that drink 8 beers or 10 beers. There's a difference, right? I mean, there's just a difference. So salt can be fantastic. It increases your uptake. That's true. That's not breaking news. It's a shame that that's just now making it mainstream. It's old news. That's been around a long time. Gatorade tries to simulate that with the sugar, but again, a crappy salt, I'm just not a fan of a crappy salt. I actually think, and I'm not a scientist, but I do study the science on that. I suspect that crappy salts are really bad for your body, even though, yes, I suspect that crappy salt will increase your hydrational uptake. Um, so the question is always how much salt, and you'll see different things as to a teaspoon a day to a teaspoon and a half. That can vary depending on the athlete, depending on, a professional athlete versus a regular person. And then normally you'd want that salt spread out though, because too much salt at once. Let me give you an example. So if I wake up in the day, I do fasting. I do intermittent fast, 12 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours. If I, let's say, took in, some salt early on with my water, and I'd used a lot of salt. I don't, obviously I'm not going to use a teaspoon first thing in the morning, but let's say I used, you know, uh, quite a bit. I can get nauseous. Salt can make you nauseous. Magnesium can make you nauseous on an empty stomach, even though magnesium is very good for you. So the body can be so sensitive where if you're on an empty stomach, you got to be careful how much salt, because it is like we just think of salt as totally innocuous, but you can definitely take in too much salt, not just things like cholesterol. People think of salt in the context of, well, it's going to raise my cholesterol. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff, problems salt can, salt, a lot of salt in your body, among other things, can also be very corrosive, just like almost like a rust effect in your body. Um, you know, Increasing your susceptibility to kidney stones in addition to sugar and other kinds of things you can take in. Kidney stones would be something like a bunch of sugar or artificial sugars or corn syrups or whatever. And then also combining that with dehydration or subhydration, and then a genetic predisposition. Now you have a higher, propensity for kidney stones, sodas, that sort of thing. But taking in a lot of salt, I think that can add to it too. So the sodium balance, there's a balance there. You have hydration. The best source, of course, for hydration is water, but you also have the sodium, and then you have certain ratios you want of the sodium to magnesium to potassium. And then you also have the trace minerals. All of those, if you were talking about optimal athletic performance, you'd want to be conscious of your hydration, of usually doing that in accompaniment, as you said, with salt, even better, like what Tom Brady does before his workouts, taking the trace minerals with, in conjunction with his water intake. Um, there's a lot I don't want to get too deep into because I could geek out on hydration for literally hours and hours here. But you're right. I mean, for everybody out there, now Gatorade. Look, I'm not. I mean, I've drank Gatorades when I was a younger athlete. I think that there are much better things. I mean, than the Powerades and the Gatorades. No offense to them. I mean, they do. You know, they. You know, I don't know. I drank them. They served their purpose for a time, for a season for me. But they're at least on the right track. Okay, in the sense that they combined water with salt. I mean, they were doing that, right? They were saying, hey, you need salt in your body, and that's kind of the open sesame to the cells. Because when you have hydration, you have intracellular water, and then you have extracellular. And the intracellular, you have a limit really on how much extracellular you can have there. If your body doesn't have the open sesame thing to the intracellular, then the water will just be extracellular. Some of it might go to your muscles, and then a lot of it's just going to be pissed out. Well, sometimes you don't want all of it to just be pissed out. You want your body to hold on to it, to retain some of it, right? And so that's where something like a salt could come in and factor into that, where it might increase your intracellular hydration. Now, if you were cutting weight, of course, I mean, everybody knows this for, let's say, a jiu-jitsu tournament or a wrestling match, or you're a UFC fighter and you're cutting weight, then of course then you wouldn't want all of that, because obviously your body's going to retain more water. Salt makes so excess salt, of course, would be a bad thing too, because you might be carrying more water than you want, and excess salt might not be a good thing if you were a distance runner or a triathlete. So really the thing that gets really tricky, Noah, for all of us with hydration is how much fluids, how much salt, how much sodium, how much magnesium. Um, that's where it gets, and then we're all different. You sweat different than I do. John Jones works out, people of different ages. So it's a fascinating rabbit hole. But yeah, for people out there, you would want to ideally. Now, look, me, I always carry salt with me everywhere. I have salt in my backpack everywhere I go. Always have salt. So I guess one of the takeaways is I always have salt with me.
I think
And I don't think I can reach the teaspoon and a half as much as I try. I don't know that I reach it. People. This is one thing I will say. Nowadays we have on Google we have the keto diet, we have the paleo diet, we have the vegan this, we have, the Atkins this, and, we have the Mediterranean diet, and everybody's got the newest, latest, biggest, baddest diet and the fad diet and whatever, right? So one thing that is clear, and I learned this the hard way as an athlete, is that fat was wrongly demonized and vilified, for a long time. It was like fat was just the bad guy, plain and simple. So if you wanted to be healthy and you wanted to be an elite athlete, whatever, you were just told, like, look, stay away from fat. Fat will give you a bad heart attack. Now, to a large extent, there's a lot that's true about that. There's so many crappy fats, like the trans fats and the hydrogenated oils and fried foods, you know, and even a lot of the saturated fats are really bad for you. But the problem is that we went and stereotyped all fats when the reality is now, as people are waking up to, there are some really good, healthy fats, and there are positives to having fat in your body, right? Even if you're an athlete, if you're in a collision sport, if you're in even our sports, just having more cushion, more armor there to protect you a little bit, not to mention keeping you warm, body insulation and whatever. So fat can be, and fat's a great energy source. Having the reserves of fat when you're doing longer distance sports or ultra marathons or triathletes, having more reserves of fat can be wonderful energy when you're doing something that might take 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours of intense, whatever. So in the same way that fat had been sort of unfairly demonized, the same things happen to salt. People have just given salt this really bad name, like, hey, there's too much salt in the processed and refined food. Absolutely. So yeah, when you're getting refined foods and processed foods is you're not aware of how much salt you just took in the day, because they put a lot. It's a great preservative. It gives things taste. So food manufacturers put a lot, generally speaking, put a lot of salt there. And you and I, if we're taking in those foods, we're not aware of how much salt, or even like sugar, how much sugar did I take in? You're not aware. If you drink a Coke, or not to pick on them, but if you drink a soda, most people aren't aware that they just downed 11 teaspoons or 12 teaspoons of sugar, because it goes down so smooth and you don't feel the sugar. You taste it or whatever, but if it would be different if you had to go and put the 11 or 12 teaspoons in yourself, you'd be like, oh my God, that's a lot of sugar. You'd probably stop, right? You'd probably stop at 3 or 4 or whatever. But most of us just aren't aware. And the same thing with our processed foods with salt. But if you're doing salt right, and you actually have the shaker and you have a good salt, a Himalayan sea salt, a Celtic salt, a Redmond sea salt, then you have the power and control to determine how much of it's going in there. Now, if you have high cholesterol or whatever, then go see your doctor. I'm not your doctor. There's always exceptions to what I'm saying. But in general, the best science that I've seen so far, and I spent a lot of time looking at this, it's a teaspoon to a teaspoon and a half for most people. It can be a lot more if you're an elite athlete or somebody who works out a lot and sweats a lot, or works outdoors, or you're an outdoor firefighter or something like that. But I just take the salt shaker with me, Noah, and that way I know how much. Now, again, I'm encouraging people, like, know thyself. If you've got a lot of health issues or cholesterol, whatever, then it might be different. If you're eating a lot of processed foods, then you might not want to walk around with a salt shaker like I do and adding even more salt on top of it, right? It's something people have got to become aware of and intelligent about. So,
well, let me jump in here with a comment, question, and ask you, take this in a direction. Comment was, I did not know there was an association with sodium intake and cholesterol. I always thought it was just blood pressure.
I'm sorry. You're correct. You're correct there. It is blood pressure. I misspoke. You're right.
But we're talking about the consumption of these salts. I've got to bring up and balance this out with the elimination of them and the clearing of them. I've always been fascinated. A few years ago, when I started doing hot yoga, or like the times whenever I've done century bike rides, go out and sweat, and I could literally peel with my fingernail layers of the white stuff off the sides of my face and my neck, and I would taste it. I'm like, oh, that's salt. It's coming from my body. From sweating so much. And this is just a little thought that I have, and I want to run it by you. Currently, I don't have access to a dry sauna, but if I
Mm-hmm.
did, I promise you, I would go in there every day and get a good sweat on every day because I'm fascinated with this concept that I can leach out. I don't know if that's the right word for it, but I can leach out all this stuff that's inside of me, all these whatever's eliminated through my pores by sweating. I'm leaching out. I'm sweating out. Um, these minerals or like whatever salts are. I'm that stuff's coming out of my body. I'm just fascinated with having a good process of doing that because I'm a bit fat, okay, and I feel like there's something to where now this is just me and my uneducated concepts of how I like trying. Whenever you don't know something, you're trying to put it together in your mind how it works. In my mind, I'm like, well, my body. If you ever worked somewhere like in a kitchen, and if the sink is already full of dirty dishes, the dishwasher is full of clean dishes, or you need to run a load on it, and the trash can's full, you
Yeah.
can't
Well,
go in there and make a meal until you've cleared out all
well,
this stuff.
so,
And I feel
so,
like that's
so,
that's the same thing with me visiting a dry sauna every day. If I were to if I go dry sauna, my body's clearing out all this stuff, eliminate it so it can process more. So I've
so,
laid that out
so,
in
so,
context for you.
so Joe Rogan, who's a nice guy, and of course, has like the world's most popular podcast. Is I don't know, maybe Joe has awakened a lot of people to the you know a new generation to the power of some of these saunas. I mean, people have been doing the saunas for a long time. Especially at like the rich athletic clubs, they've been doing them there for a long time before there were podcasts and before there was the internet. But you know, there are different minds on this. I've been in many saunas. I mean, first of all, training jujitsu, a good intense jujitsu session where you sweat a lot, whether gi or no gi, is probably many of the same effects as a sauna. I mean, you're just, that's probably part of the power of it too, is that not only are you concentrating, not only are you exercising your mind and your body, not only is there sort of a kind of a Zen thing to it, there's something primal in us that wants to do it, but there's also a detox element that you're expelling um, chemical toxins, but you're also expelling, whatever emotions you have that are causing you anger or whatever, anxiety. So you're detoxifying on many levels, a mental level, a physical level, I would argue a spiritual level as well. So there are a lot of detox methods out there. Fasting, which I do and which many people do. I saw Mikey Musumeci in the grocery store the other day, and he was telling me, "Oh, I eat one meal a day and I fast, whatever, however many, almost all day." And he told me he eats 7,000 calories now. I said, "Well, it gets good." I said, "Mikey, everybody should be fasting, right?" And of course, throughout the ages, for centuries and centuries, probably millennia, there have been people, religious people, that have fasted and saw the value of that. They may not have understood all of the scientific mechanisms and processes going on, but fasting, can serve that detox element as well. The body sort of, it's the idea, and I believe in it. I subscribe to it that our bodies are naturally very intelligent. The body, the immune system, 80% of the immune system's in the stomach. Our body is super intelligent, but we have to kind of get out of the way. If we're just constantly eating calories and constantly taking in toxins and constantly taking in processed food, fried foods, hydrogenated oils, and stress, then that immune system, as wonderful as it is, as intelligent as it is, knowing what it needs to go fix, is just overwhelmed. It's an overwhelmed army. And it's saying, listen, can you give me a break? Can you stop bombarding me with all these toxins? Give me a break, and then I'll do some spring cleaning. I'll go in there and I'll kind of roto-rooter. And it's just like cleaning your house or whatever. It's like auto maintenance, right? It's like cell phone device or something that wants to automatically have an update, and you just got to take the time. Do you want to give it time to do that update or not? Right? The phone's going to run better if you let the phone do the update. But if you keep kicking it down the curve, then certain things start to, I've noticed that certain parts of your phone eventually start to not work as well because you just won't take the damn 10 minutes or 15 minutes to do the damn update, right? And so finally, all right, I'm gonna let you do the update. And then fasting kind of has that, it's the body in general being intelligent, saying, look, man, I got your back. I know what you need. But if you don't give me time to do it and get the hell out of my way, then I can't go do it. And then you're just putting more toxins and allergens and gook and whatever in me, and you're making a mess, and you're never giving me time to clean it. So, you have fasting that can do that. I think for the saunas, I mean, they can be wonderful, especially I've heard that the infrareds, I've actually never done an infrared. I'd like to get one day. I hear so many wonderful things. But the thing is, the thing I think about the saunas too, it's kind of like hot yoga, and I've done the 103.5 degree. I've done a bunch of those sessions in hot yoga. There's something mystical or spiritual or, there's something else going on in addition to the knowing that you're sweating out toxins good for you. There's a point where you're in there and you're sweating. There's a point of just, it's almost like, imagine there's so much. So think about it. When you're in a sauna, number one, in addition to sweating, you're in there and it's completely quiet pretty much. So you're almost like in a quiet chamber. Like that's unusual because that's probably the most quiet thing you've done all day. Like there is a degree of sensory deprivation or sensory limitation in there, and maybe somebody else is in the sauna, but in general you're not, there's not a bombardment. The senses are not bombarded with, look at this sign, look at these people, look at this crying kid, look at this honking horn, look at this motorist, this loud motorist. So there's a degree there too of sensory, like relaxation and turn off and quietude and then your mind is just like, you're in there and your mind's like, well, where do I want to go? Because you don't have your cell phone, you don't have whatever. It's like you're alone with your mind and you're like, hey mind, where do you want to go? Do you want to do nothing? Do you want to think about something? What the hell am I going to think about? Oh, damn, I'm hot. It's pretty sweaty here. Oh man, that feels good. And so it's an interesting place for the brain to be in that little kind of, chamber where you're turning off regular life. And so part of what I would say is, again, it's not just a physical, chemical detoxification. There's probably a lot of emotional detoxification. There's a relaxing of the muscles because they get heated up there, they get relaxed. So that influences a lot of things. And then, on a spiritual level, if you're a spiritual person, that can happen too. So, with the detox too, though, as you mentioned, hydration. I mean, hydration has got to be part of any detoxification protocol. It's going to flush things, And most people are subhydrated. Most are subhydrated. I've researched all this a lot. Most of us are subhydrated. When I looked, Noah, when I was training a lot, I used to train jujitsu. People might not, they look at me and they don't have any clue because I'm not a big name or whatever. But I'm telling you, brother, there were years where I trained twice a day, man, 5 days a week. And then I trained on Saturdays too. And then I would normally there were times I'd get in 3 trainings in a day. There were a couple of years where I got in like 2 a day and then a lot of 3 a days. I mean, 3 a day being the third one being like I would go lift weights or I'd go run sprints. So they weren't, but a lot of 2 a days with jujitsu, and then the 3 a days might be cycling or swimming and lifting weights and then jujitsu sessions. I was doing a lot. And whenever I had an off day, the 2 biggest things, and I would say the biggest thing, and I was training, I didn't start jujitsu till I was 30 years old. But I would say the biggest thing, especially out here in this desert, was hydration. That was the number one. When I was having an off day, it was the hydration. And then if I was having an off day, it was overtraining. Those were the 2 most common. And then, and then it would be something like not knowing back then, but it would be sleep deprivation. So the ones you look at, I mean, if you're not performing like you do, it's either your hydration, it's your overtraining, or you need to have a rest day or a lighter day in there. So it's your hydration, your overtraining, it's your sleep. Most of us aren't sleeping that well, or it's your diet. Most people are eating crappy diet. It's just those 4. I mean, they're obvious. They're fairly obvious, but to master those 4 it's hard for people because then that involves changing a lot of habits. That involves raising our awareness, being disciplined. But man, if you're not training like you want, I mean, it could be emotional burnout for some people, but that's overtraining. Overtraining includes emotional burnout, or you're distracted by by something. But I would say you always start with your hydration. Look at your hydration first. Then if it's not your hydration, are you overtraining? How hard? Do you need to cut back? Do you need some lighter days? And then of course sleep. You and I always talk about that. It's like, man, you know, and good sleep is not just about 7, 8 hours, because Charles Barkley used to talk about this, and I think he's right. And I think sleep science confirms this, that, Charles Barkley was talking about some of the NBA players that would get to bed at 3 in the morning. They'd go out and they'd party, and then they'd wake up at 11 the next day, 11 a.m. the next day. And then you wouldn't, they got 8 hours, but they wouldn't feel great for the games, because that 8 hours is not the same as, say, 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. like a Tom Brady. That's different. And that 8 hours is different when you're consistent about the 8 hours. If you're consistent about your 8 hours, your body, your circadian rhythm, everything gets better in tune. Even if you get 8 hours a day, but your 8 hours is all over the board, you start messing with the circadian rhythm, you start messing with the hormones, you start messing with your metabolism, you start messing with your ghrelin, your hunger hormone, you start throwing all kinds of things out of whack. So it's important to try to get, when you talk about sleep, to not just, okay, whether it's 10 p.m. up at 6 a.m. or whatever that's going to be, but also getting a ritual around going to sleep, like that last 30 minutes or so before you go to sleep, getting into a ritual that so your body knows, don't take your cell phone in the bedroom with you. Don't be checking your emails there. I would recommend for anybody out there, I would absolutely not. This is just me. I haven't had a TV for 11 years myself. Personally, my own house, I have not had 11. I've lived with, a girlfriend who had a TV. I've stayed with buddies I've stayed at hotels where there was a TV, but I haven't had TV in 11 years. But I would say, do not have a TV in your bedroom. Do not. I would say if you're not sleeping like you want to sleep, I mean, everybody knows toning on the cell phone, the blue light, yada, yada, yada. Bro, that TV's got to be somewhere else. I would not have one in your bedroom, because then you're telling the brain it's okay to have stimulation there before you go to bed. And then also, you're kind of a captive audience. They've done studies on dementia and TV, right? So I'm making a reach here, but dementia and TV, there have been scientific links to that. People who watch more TV are way more prone to dementia. But also, to me, before you go to sleep is a great time to almost, like, when I say hypnotize, I'm using that loosely, but to train your mind. Like, you're going to have dreams, and the power of the subconscious mind, if you're thinking about jujitsu, or you're thinking about your ideal self, or you're thinking about all the great things that are coming into your life and manifesting, and prosperity, and how lucky you are, and gratitude, you're going to influence your subconscious mind. You're going to influence the seeds you're planting in your subconscious mind, which is what most of us are running off of day to day. So if you want to rewire the subconscious mind, you want to plant new seeds, the perfect time to plant those seeds, I mean, that's been proven too. And the perfect time to plant those seeds is like 15 to 20 minutes before you go to bed, 15 to 20 minutes when you first wake up. Whether you want to call that meditation, prayer, Sam Harris app, those are the times where that subconscious mind is still ripe for reprogramming. So that's a very sacred time before you go to bed, to just, like, get yourself a ritual, man. And that's precious stuff. If you're serious about optimal performance, your best self, personal growth, if you're serious about it, you can't just hear about, oh, sleep. You got to really, like, dig in and be disciplined on your sleep.
What we're talking about here on this podcast in a lot of ways is, let's just call it the deliberate practice, which is, it's way more than 10,000 hours. It's, all that you do as a jiu-jitsu practitioner, as a fan of MMA and the fight sports, all this stuff that we're covering, it's little ways you dig into it, and practice it, figuring out things. I just learned this week, like, how is it that, so for me, my sleep issue is not falling asleep at all. That's not my issue. First, I first had to conquer my issue of having caffeine close to bedtime, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, I'm so tired, I'll go sleep to anything, and I would tell myself this, but in the past 2 3 years, I started paying attention to how much um, caffeine does affect my sleep. Like I started paying attention to my sleep behaviors, and so now I have a hard cutoff of like 2 p.m. Um, I don't hit the caffeine. I'm done. No caffeine. And it's just little ways. And this week I learned that something called vasopressin, um, which from my understanding is a hormone that the body secretes. How how is it? And like for my sleep issue has always been it's not that I fall asleep, it's that I can't stay asleep, you know? And because of the work I used to do, investment banking and, I'm travel all the time. And so that issue of not having a sleep routine, really, did a lot of damage, long-term damage that I've had to spend I've spent some time, effort, definitely some money at trying to correct. And so I've learned the role of vasopressin in uh, calming down your need to get up and go pee in the middle of the night. Because what I had started to do was to eliminate drinking any fluids close to bedtime because of this problem. But really, there was actually something else that was the cause, that was like underlying this, and that's I I would I would follow that habit of it doesn't matter what 8 hours as long as I get 8 hours. And so my hormonal system was not secreting this valuable hormone which calms down the need to urinate overnight because I was not consistent with my bedtime. Like when I go to sleep, I'm out within 15 minutes. I'm done. But I was waking up and I was having intrusive thoughts. I was having intrusive thoughts keep me up, and I was ruminating. I worked through that problem. I finally worked through, where I stopped thinking about things, and that was aided by meditation. Where I learned to just let go of thoughts and let them go, and I've literally closed my eyes at night, and I play slideshow. It's a game that I play in my mind, and it's where try to think as many images in your mind as fast as possible. So total saturation with your eyes closed, and, I'm in a dark, cool space where I sleep, kind of like a coffin. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I play a game called Slideshow, and I try to have as many, and it becomes it's a little hallucinogenic. Is I can't explain it another way except I start having thousands and thousands of images all meshed together like at super speed, and somehow that you know all it seems like overwhelming, but it actually is just my mind just kind of just like switches and goes, okay, you're asleep. But anyways, I play slideshow in my mind, um, to let go of trying to ruminate on thoughts. But vasopressin is a hormone your body secretes, and it when you're sleeping, assuming you have a regular sleep schedule, um, and it starts to secrete it at that time at bedtime, and it suppresses the need for you to urinate overnight. When I was in the Marine Corps, a lot of good habits that I established in my life came from the Marine Corps. We had to do what was called wagon wheel at curfew every night. And we had 2 canteen bottles, and we fill them up, and we had to drink them at lights out. We had to drink them. So we would walk around in our flip flops and skivvies in the squad bay and hold those. We'd have to hold those canteen bottles over our heads to demonstrate that we drank them. Okay, and so we would hydrate every night before we went to sleep. Every night, and that's just obviously the Marine Corps or the Department of Defense has done physiological studies on hydration, and that's where this is coming from, this requirement. And that taught me a good habit of drinking water before bedtime. Obviously, this is an extreme example because I was in a military boot camp, and in that environment, we're expending a lot of energy and sweating a lot, even though it was Southern California in the wintertime. Not a bad place.
Yeah, my big thing, I would say that the more, obviously if someone doesn't sleep well, that's a symptom of something, right? I mean, obviously, if somebody's not like, oh, I don't sleep well, it's like that's a symptom that the person's got a lot going on in their subconscious mind. I mean, they're under pressure, whether it be they're an entrepreneur, whether it be an athlete, whether it be somebody sick, whether it be relationship issues. There's something going on there, and it's usually not good. And so the more peace that we can cultivate throughout the day, the more sense of peace we have with ourselves, the more relaxed, the better we sleep. The people that worry the least are going to sleep the best. I mean, and what I find for me, my motivation at this season of my life is like, well, why is sleep so important? And then honestly, I have to make myself today. I think I slept 8.5, 9 hours. That's pretty rare. And that's needed. I need that. I need to have one day a week where I'm like 9 or 10 hours. It's hard for me to do that. I don't get to do that as much as I want to, but I need that. And most days I probably need 8 hours, but I only get 7 hours most days. I probably need 8 because I'm so big on aging well and longevity. I could use the whole 8. But since I've got projects and things that need to be done and things that I just think that are important to me, and my burning desire to do certain things, to things that I've been wanting for a long time. And I do find that, for me, my motivation is I do want to age well. So I've got to get to where I'm at 8 hours a night because it's just so fantastic for you on so many levels, to reset, whether it be your physical exertion, whether it be stress. Even, look, it's not just stress. We always think of the sleep for like longevity. It's not just that. Your body cleaning out, when we're talking about like fasting, it cleans out better in sleep. That's what, it's not just a muscle rebuild. Oh, you had a hard workout. We always think of that. It's like everything. You have plaque, it doesn't like in your body. It wants to go. It does that better at sleep. The body's just, we're not bugging it. The body goes, it knows what it needs to do. And so when it's cheated sleep, I mean, people should get their hands on sleep science out there. Like they go and they show people, they do all these studies on people that get 4 or 5 hours of sleep. Oh my God, it wreaks havoc. People used to be proud of that, right? Like the science on people that are going off 4 or 5 hours, it is like, it should almost be classified as a form of mental, like, of mental disorder or something. Like if you're sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day in general, you're pretty much, you're like a walking, talking mental disorder. Like you're probably a wreck. So it's nothing to be proud of. I used to be proud of it. I used to be that 4 or 5 hour a night guy for a long time. And what that means is you've got something going on subconsciously. That restlessness, at some point, it's very destructive to be that restless. Like, wait, what's going on, Frank, that you can't relax, that you can't chill, that you can't calm this body down? Because if you're always that on, then that means a lot of times that, you don't have a sense of peace. You're tightly wound. You're type A, you're anxious. And I'm like, the thing I'm thinking, okay, I'm thinking about aging. I'm thinking about like, I want to age well. I want to live as long as I can. I'm so curious. so many things professionally I want to do. There's so much I want to experience. But the other side of it, Noah, is empowerment. Like, I want to be my best self. And if I'm restless or I'm anxious or I'm worried or I'm afraid of something, I'm like, then that means a lot of times that I'm like, I'm usually when you're worrying and you're anxious, you know what you're worried about? Things you can't control. You're worried about things outside of yourself that you can't control. Most people walking around afraid, anxious, worried are worried about either what someone else thinks or circumstances outside of your control, which is just a losing game. The only thing you can do, to me, when I think about empowerment, personal empowerment, it's like, what is in your control? What's in your control is what you choose to think, what you choose to do, their habits. Those are in my control. So if I'm sitting here and I'm like worried all day long, and I'm worried and I'm worried and I'm worried, and then when I go to sleep, I'm still worried. So I only sleep 5 hours. I get 5 crappy hours. I'm like, Frank, why are you worried? And guess what I think? I'm like, to worry that much and then to disrupt my sleep, guess what that is? That's disempowering. That is like supremely disempowering. You know what's empowering? To worry about the stuff that's in my control. And everything that pertains to me is in my control. When I start worrying about other people, what they think, what they're doing, they should do this, telling them how to live their life, then I'm like worried about, well, what are they going to say about this? Because I'm worried about their life, what they're going to do. I'm like, and when I'm honest, I'm like, you know what, Frank, you got your hands full running your own life, keeping your own life in order. How about that? But the more focus I put on, like, hey, be the best you, be empowering, only worry about yourself, what you're going to think, and and what's in your control, and try to be, nice to people and kind and all that, but make sure your head's on straight. Don't walk around worrying. What's that old Asian proverb? If you're anxious, you're living in the past, and if you're depressed, you're living in the past, and if you're anxious, you're living in the future. Right? The power's in the present. So the more I'm just like, to me, it's just about empowerment, man. Like, when you're empowered and you're just worried about what you can control, worried about what you're going to do, what you're going to think, I just think you're more relaxed, you're more at ease, you're more at peace. That peace is valuable. And I think you sleep better. I think it's easier to turn the world off when you stop worrying about everyone else's stuff, or even the negative headline you read. It's not at your front door right now. We read these headlines and we're like freaked out. We read, oh my God, the world's going to hell. You could read negative headlines. Literally, if you spent the rest of your life, every waking second reading negative headlines, they've never run out of them. They've been doing it forever. When the great philosopher poet Emerson was alive, there were religious people saying that the end of the world was near. That was a real, they've been doing that for a long time. Like, the end of the world, they were scaring people with that. The end of the world is near. And Emerson was like, no, it's not. No, it's not. And he chose not to believe it. And the end of the world wasn't near. And now people see the same stuff going on now, and they're like, oh my God, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Is the end of the world near? Or is this, whatever, like whatever doomsday scenario? It's like, no, it's probably not. And don't worry yourself. Don't drive yourself crazy with that. Like, control what you can. You were on a bike with your dog. You were with your family today. You're going to cook dinner. You're going to train your jiu-jitsu. You got great things working financially with your job. Like, worry about that. And I'm going to worry about the stuff I got to do, and having a good podcast and helping people or coaching people or doing some nice people, not the paper tiger that's on a headline somewhere that tells you the sky is falling in. And we're all like running around scared.
Let me jump in here real quick.
Reading about how the world's going to go to hell in a handbasket when it's not.
Well, you just said something, and it hit on a topic that I wanted to. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to ask you about this. Which today's podcast, to me, it feels a little self-serving, because I wanted to spend some time with you talking about some of these topics and sharing with you. And something that came up recently, I talked about training endurance sports before. Well, excuse me while I go fix my bike right now. I just broke the handbrake on the right side, of the bike. So I have to put my outdoor cycling on pause until I get that brake fix. Which there'll be no more dog near my bike going forward for a
Mm-hmm.
while. But you know, you I don't know how to say this other than I just got to say it because I'm not as articulate as you in a lot of matters. Um, it just seems a bit selfish to uh, jujitsu as a sport, and for me to think about these things. And as I'm saying it, I have thoughts that come to me. But if you're like training for like a triathlon, there's a lot of training involved there. But now I think about jujitsu, there's a lot going on with jujitsu. Like I have to do all this work, and it seems selfish. Okay, so um, it seems selfish. Now I'm not dealing with that issue myself here in my own household. In fact, if anything,
Yeah, I know how many people you help too. No, I know
my family
you and I
would
know.
say,
Yeah,
please be more selfish.
yeah.
What they would say is,
You're very generous. You're a very generous gentleman.
thanks, man. I appreciate that. Um, in fact, what my family would say is, please be more selfish. Take care of yourself more. Um, and you're talking about longevity and doing these things. Um, for our listeners out there, and I really care. What I care about, and like one of my life purposes, is service to guys like me. Get stuck in these little situations in their life, and they find jujitsu, but they've got to work it out. They got to work out a lot of stuff with their lives to get there. Okay, to get to that good balance of training jits. Um, how can you balance the argument or the discussion around where you're just being jealous, or you're just being not jealous, you're being selfish, of taking care of yourself so much, you
Well,
know.
okay. Let me interject for 1 second, and because
No,
I've
I gave it
wrestled.
to you. This is all
Yeah,
you. Take it.
you know
Yeah.
that I've wrestled with this, and this was one of the subplots in the TEDx talk I gave about ego, right? I mean, this is one of the subplots. It's about balancing, trying to balance that ego. And the way that I think of it, there's many ways to do this, but one of the ways that I think of it in my own life is I'm like, well, Frank, you've been a selfish bastard for a lot of the first 49 years of your life. Not all. I've done a lot of volunteer stuff. I've done a lot of sweetheart stuff. I've done stuff that I don't go around telling people do. I've done my fair share of good deeds, and it feels really good to do that. I'm generous with my time when people call me and they've got issues and they're in a low place. So I've done my share, but still, I've spent a lot of my adult life being selfish, but worried on my jujitsu training primarily, and and being obsessed with certain things, and maybe in certain seasons of my life, definitely like it was all about me and my ambition and what I was chasing. And so, thank God I'm still alive. And now I look and I'm like, well, Frank, you know, this second half of your life, these new seasons, now it can be about other people. It can be about serving other people. It can be about teaching. It can be about sharing what you've learned. It can be about helping other people, like always looking for those opportunities. And the way that I think of it is kind of like, um, you have to, before we can really be a great teacher, Noah, we have to fix the problem. So the problem that Noah wants to fix, whatever that monkey or that thing is that's chasing you, in order for you to be a great teacher of that, you've got to crack the code. You've got to figure that out. And guess what? The bad news for us is that sometimes it takes a long time to crack the code and figure it out. So sometimes we might be pretty damn selfish while we're going through something, while we're overwhelmed by it, while we're consumed by it, while we're hurt by it, while we're heartbroken by it, while we're desperate or depressed because of it. We might carry that cross for longer than we want. But then when you crack the code and you figure it out, if you were selfish for 45 years trying to figure it out, Don't be selfish sharing it then. Now's the season to be unselfish because, hey, buddy, you figured the way out. You created a map. You did the work. You cracked the code, or you did a pretty good job of that. Now, who can you find, like you said, who's like you, who needs to hear that, who needs to hear that message, who needs to read your book, whatever? Who can you find that needs to hear that? Go find them. And some of them won't be ready to hear what you have to teach. They're just not ready, just like you weren't ready at certain points. Some of them won't be ready, but some of them will. Your job is to take the message to whoever needs to hear it and wants to hear it, because you figured the way out. And maybe you can't do all the work for them, but you might be able to shorten their learning curve. You might be able to let them feel like, man, somebody out there understands me. He's been through it. You might give somebody hope to say, hey, he made it through that. I know exactly what he's talking about. I'm going through that. Hey, man, he made it out. I probably can make it out too, even if it's a different way. But sometimes we have to be selfish, like your mask first, like the airplane, like the book. It's like, you know, at certain seasons of my life, it was like I was going to drown. Like psychologically, I was going to drown. And so I had to be worried about my own stuff. I had to be selfish because I was like, I was just going to drown then. And then what good am I to anybody? And so everything seems so heavy. It's like, okay, save your own life. And then if you can save your own life and you figured out how to do that and you can remember that and maybe you can teach it or you can share it with somebody, guess what? There's people out there that need to hear your message. They might not be everybody, might not be most people, but there's people out there that like, hey man, this person understands me. I want to listen to them. So that's where the unselfishness comes from. It's like, okay, when you're the student sometimes and you're going through it, you might be generous here and there. You might be unselfish, but then maybe there's a lot of selfishness. There's seasons of selfishness. But then once you kind of crack the code and you fix it, or you know the way out, it's like, okay, man, it would be really selfish of you to figure it out and then not tell anybody.
Yeah.
Like, oh, forget you. Figure it out yourself. That would be, then I think I would really condemn myself. Like, Frank, what's the point of life if you're just going to crack the code, figure this stuff out, and then not go back to help somebody else who might be drowning? Like, it's like finding a way to not drown, but you're not going to teach anybody else how to not drown. Like, that's really selfish. Like, save yourself from drowning. And then when you do, trust me, there's a lot of people out there that feel like they're drowning, man. You'll be busy. There's a lot of people that feel like they're drowning one way or the other, and they need other people who, because that's the thing, Noah, as a teacher, whether it's you, whether it's me, the best teachers, people can tell who's been through it and who hasn't. And that's who they want to hear. When it comes to drug addicts, you know who the best people to teach drug addicts and that have the best success rate with, taking people who are drug addicts and getting them to not use again? Other ex-drug addicts, like people who learn how to conquer it, are the best teachers. It's hard to find like sober people that are teaching drug addicts how to not use again. That's pretty damn hard, because they can tell, the drug addict can tell if you went through it and you lived it or you didn't. And if you didn't live through it, you got zero credibility with them.
I
Zero.
totally
You're not reaching
accept that. I totally accept
people
that.
can tell, people can tell what you've been through. The right people, your tribe, the people that need to hear it, they can tell. And the fact that you went through it too, and now you're talking to them, means a lot. That means a lot that you went through it and they know you did. And they have a lot more faith in what you say. And that matters, because a lot of people won't heal, not because they're not getting good advice, but because they don't have faith in the advice. It's one thing to get good advice. It's another thing to have faith in, and to have, credibility in the advice. A lot of people just don't know what to believe. They don't know. But when you've been through it, Noah, and you've been through a lot of stuff, you go back and teach that, it's powerful, because people can tell, damn, this guy went through it too. And it's hopeful. It gives you hope when that other person went through it, and then you look at him now and you're like, damn, he's doing pretty well. He's wearing it pretty well. He's handling it pretty well. Damn, I guess it does get better.
Yeah, my interest in deliberate practice is now, it started, I gotta say, it started with me realizing that I could use the VA, and all, they employ more psychologists than any other entity on the planet. And it kind of clicked with me one day. I was walking on 43rd between 8th and 9th Avenue. I just remember the moment on the sidewalk where I'm like, oh, I need to use what resources I have available for me and just like go after it. Get into my own crap and start resolving my life problems. Like I had a few years of tax returns to do. I'm a CPA. And that was hard to do. I had some money issues. Got to figure out how to have multiple streams of income so I'm not dependent upon one thing and then, staying up all night trying to figure that out. Relationships, improve my communication, slow things down with myself, with jumping to conclusions and all the stuff that goes into being a good human. That's my deliberate practice. But I first had to learn a bit about what deliberate practice is. I'm kind of a nerd in that sense. Thank you very much. You are so reliable. I wanted to say this at the opening, but we just got we our podcast took its path that it usually takes. But I want to say gratitude for you as a co-host. I can always rely upon you. Like I know that come Sunday, I know that you're going to be there. You're going to be there. If you're not, then something's wrong. To me, that's how you're so reliable as a person. Um, in my constellation of people that I know, you are absolutely one of the most reliable people that I know. Is that you have a very high reliability score, and I want to appreciate that. That is something awesome about you, and that you are also there to talk to. You just have spent so much time over the years investing in your knowledge and investing in your ability to be a counselor. Uh, I call you coach, and really that's not enough. You go way beyond that, and I'm happy to see you take on your challenges in your life. It's good to see your coach challenging themselves, in their life. So I commend you on some of the challenges that you're yoking yourself with.
Yeah,
It's
I've said this. No, I really appreciate that. The way that I view it, and I'll give people a spiritual alert now, so people who are non-spiritual can cover their ears. But I really do believe, and I can't prove it, but I believe that I chose this life, that I chose it. I chose to sign up for this before this. I believe we're eternal energy. We live forever. We take different forms. We live different lives. And I believe that I signed up for this assignment. So, well, who am I going to be mad at? Who am I going to point the finger at? Like, there's things we all need, like we always say, you've said, we're all John Jones. We're all John Jones. We're not all John. We don't all have John Jones's same problems, but we all have problems just like John Jones. We're all white belts at something, at many things. We are. I mean, I'm a baby at a lot of things, and the older I get, the more I realize, oh my God, I don't know that. And then the older I get, the more I'm open to changing my mind. I'm like, Frank, you could be wrong about that. Like, just keep that in mind. And so I'm always open to the possibility as a philosopher that I'm wrong about something, because I'm wrong about a lot of things. It's amazing that we can actually improve our lives and be wrong about so much, because we are wrong about a lot of things. It's amazing the results we can get even when we're wrong about a lot of things. But if we're just well intended, if we just have good intentions and we're wrong, you can still actually have a pretty damn good life. Just if the intentions are good but you're wrong about a lot, it's almost like people cut you slack, and just because you have a good attitude, and good things still happen to you. But if you got bad intentions and then you're wrong about a lot of things, you're pretty much screwed. So I would definitely say, at the very least, if you're going to be wrong about things, make sure you have good intentions, and make sure you keep an open mind to the possibility that new information is always going to be coming down the pike, and be ready to change your mind. So it's you know we're this is a fun ride here, this little planet Earth experiment we have right now. It's fun. I want to milk it for as much as I can. I think the challenge is, this is one thing I wanted to say because we were talking about selfishness for a second. And the thing I've had to work on a lot, and I've seen this with a lot of really high performers, I've had to work on the competitiveness thing. A buddy of mine said to me the other day at Whole Foods, I always see him there, and smart guy, artist, and he's always says something like um, he calls it the competition trap. He was talking about like the competition trap, and some people have said comparison is the thief of joy, that sort of thing. And I've really had to work on that one because when you're ultra 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 competitive, there's a lot of selfishness wrapped in that. And that's what a lot of champions have. A lot of the best champions, they're really selfish. When you watch the documentaries on them behind the scenes, I mean, usually the highest performers, the greatest world champions, the standard's so high, they're so type A, and there's a lot of selfishness. And I think a lot of very high performers would admit that there's a lot of selfishness there. And that's something I have to work on because there's always that pendulum between competitiveness and cooperativeness. And what I've had to learn um, is to not always be so competitive, because when you're always so competitive, that means you're always making it about you, and that means that the world is always about you, and always about you. And the reality is, this world is not all about me. I share this world with 7 point whatever billion people who I come into contact with in one form or another. I come into contact with a number of them. And that's my world. My world is not just me. I don't live alone. We're all entangled. We're all intertwined. Our fates, we all need somebody. The lone wolf eventually starves. So we all need people. We're all white belts at many things. And so we realize, like, instead of always competing, which I do, I've had to learn to when to turn off that competitive instinct and just say, Wayne Dyer used to say, it's better to be kind than right. And sometimes that's the right thing. Sometimes instead of you being right or being the smartest or winning the debate or getting the last word, sometimes the right thing is to just be kind to somebody, be nice to them, have mercy on them, forgive them. You don't have to get the last word, and you don't have to remind them, I'm smarter than you. I know better than you. I studied philosophy. I was in a debate club. They don't need that. Like, sometimes it's better to just understand somebody or forgive them or have mercy on them, or just try to turn them around or make them not mad or make them feel a little bit better about the day, instead of always being just like, what are you looking at? You got a problem? Or, do you know who I am? Or, I'm the champ. You're not, you suck, and just, that's when you talk about selfishness, those are the things that a lot of us have to look inside of ourselves and say, hey man, did you just live all of today? It's a beautiful Sunday. Was today just all about you, man? Or did you do something nice for somebody? Did you take somebody's call that needed to be listened to? Or did you do, whatever, fix somebody's flat tire or whatever? I mean, and a lot of times, Noah, really quick, there was a woman last night at the gas station. Some other guy helped her, but she was like, she didn't want to pump air in her tire. Like, she didn't know. She's an older woman, like 68, 70 years old. And she needed somebody to, now, but we could have been like, dude, like, pump your own air. I do it. It's the wind's blowing out here. It's windy, whatever. It's like, that's a challenge for her. Maybe plenty of other things. She could do something for us. Like, hey, could you, whatever, watch my, whatever, make sure there's a package being delivered today. Could you make sure that, could you take it in? She's your neighbor or something. Could you pick? Yeah. I mean, we all need each other. So, like, in this case, she needed somebody to pump air in her tires. Okay. It seems pretty easy, doesn't it? Like, what are you talking about? It's the easiest thing in the world, pump air in your tires. Well, guess what? She didn't bother with it. I don't know. Like, we could help them. I mean, we could say, here's how you do it. Or we could just say, I'll just do it. But that's the kind of stuff where unselfishness, it's little things like that. And it's not always, I have to win. Like, it's okay for me to be like, it's okay if you're better at jujitsu, if I'm your coach and I teach you or whatever. It's okay if I show you everything and you're 3 times as good as me. I shouldn't be mad or jealous of that. I should be like, good, I'm supposed to teach you everything that I know. And hopefully you are better than me. And I'm not jealous of you. And I'm not jealous of another kid that walks around who's 20, who's better than I was at whatever, writing or whatever. It's okay, It doesn't make you or me not valuable, because you're still valuable. You just have other things about you that are really valuable. Or maybe your jujitsu is knowledgeable. It just isn't. Gordon Ryan is not going to be our client or something. Maybe your jujitsu IQ one day will be. You'll coach kids and they'll need that knowledge, but Gordon Ryan doesn't, and that's okay. That's entirely okay. That doesn't mean you're not worth something. So I was thinking, like, all of these accolades and achievements and awards and just shallow stuff, which never satiates you, never satisfies you, not even close. And what is satisfying is when someone calls you and you help them. That feels good. Not when someone calls you and, or someone wants to argue and fight with you, and then you knock them upside the head, and then you're like, oh, what did I do? What feels good is I helped that person. I helped them solve that problem. I had a solution for them. I made them smile. I got to say goodbye to my friend, Sydney, before he died at age 92. I got to be with him. Those things, and they're not selfish things. Those are going to be, it took me a long time. The things that are going to feel the best in the long term, I can say, are going to be the unselfish things that you did for other people. And you don't really even care if they're going to do something nice for you, because you don't know. You just want to do it. It's who you are. You just do it because that's who you are, not because of what might come back in return. That's just who the hell you are. Like, that's kind of the mark, and that's taken me, quite a few years to to put that little Rubik's cube, that little part of the Rubik's cube together. So,
Well, in my case, we're at overtime here, and so this is for a future discussion. I bring it in, just like I did with the hydration. Um,
yeah.
Maybe this is semantics here, but I want to start working towards. If we don't want to have to use the word selfish, but
Mm-hmm.
I want to bring in total focus on training jits, because for me, I'm at that point where now's a good time in my life. Things are kind of calming down. I want to go after it. I want to set my things up where I'm at in my life, and then push to optimize. It's like, you see like an aircraft taking off, and you see them just push that throttle forward. I feel like now, with everything open up and with how things are, I want to push that throttle forward so I can get a moment of, whenever that moment of lift hits, where things start to take off. So we don't have to call it being selfish, but it is training focused. And so I want to push I'm gonna take that throttle and move it forward. At least for me, I want to move that throttle forward
Well, you wouldn't
on
have anything
training.
to teach people if you weren't a little bit selfish at certain periods, or
Yes, that's
whatever word we
right.
want to
That's
use.
right. That's
You
right.
wouldn't
Yeah.
you wouldn't have anything to teach anybody.
Yeah. Well, I want to push the throttle forward on my blue belt. I've been blue belt long
Okay.
enough. Now I need to get a lot of mat time in, and I want to find ways of accelerating my learning of jujitsu. For me, when I start to do something like this, it's like me going after a professional certification. You know, I start I start, for me, like if I were to go for a professional certification, like a CPA license, it is nonstop for me. There is no fat in my time. I am studying it all the time. I'm in an elevator going through digital flashcards, so I'm pretty much ready. Um, with where I'm at, to start moving that throttle forward and doing intense training. As a matter of fact, I gotta get out of here because I got a pedicure. Why? Because I'm taking care of my feet. You don't want to have those cracked feet going on the mats. And now I have
No.
this big. Now I have a big gauze bandage with an ace bandage wrapped around it on my knee because it's a big bloody mess from the pavement. Um, but that's not selfish. But it is the B side of all those wonderful things you just said about being unselfish. Now the B side of that is being uh, acutely focused on your training, and that's the B side of this. And I want to get a little imbalance.
The only reason that I
I'm
know
going to
that I'm
go a
selfish
little
is the
further
way
in
to
that.
go is because I've been selfish. You got it. If you're
Yeah,
gonna
you've
know,
been.
if
I
you're
haven't.
if you're
I
gonna
haven't.
if you're gonna know the value of unselfish, then you got to kind of know the selfish side too. So it's good to know
Yeah,
both. It's good.
yeah,
It's good to know both.
yeah. Well,
Um,
so yeah, I'm saying it now that for next Sunday, if we can, I like for our pinnacle discussion of the hour and a half is we talk about total training focus. Okay, and I want to learn guerrilla training tactics. When I talk about guerrilla training, my mindset that is about um, there's no obstacles. There's nothing that stops me. I'm watching videos. Oh, hey, it's sleep time. Sleep time's on. Nutrition, got it. This is where you start to hit that optimum spot, that sweet spot that you want. So for me, it's that time. As a blue belt, I like to move the throttle forward. So that's my ask of you. If you contemplate these things, I'm going to be writing every day about this, about what is total training focus. And maybe we can reach out to our Navy SEAL friend and ask him how the Navy SEALs bring total training focus to jiu-jitsu practice. That would be good. Maybe we work it up. We work up some of these concepts in the podcast, and then we can interrogate a Navy SEAL about how, if you were a Navy SEAL, how would you train jujitsu? What's that total training focus that they have? Bring that layer in. That would be good. All right, I gotta bounce. I gotta go get my feet fixed.
we'll see you, Noah. Enjoy your pedicure, and I'm glad you're in one piece. We're both in one piece after the bike accident.
I know. I'm so thankful
I'm gonna
for
go
you.
hydrate with some watermelon now. I got some
I
watermelon
am this
awaiting me.
this bruise is forming. It feels hot. This is going to be something. All right, take care, man. I'll see you
See you,
next
buddy.
Sunday. Ciao.
Bye, everyone.